Okay.
Thank you so much for doing the recording for us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so I wrote down my questions this time. Oh, okay. Yeah. I wrote down my questions this time. So,
Sounds good. And then last time I said I jumped the gun on the module, on discussing the module. So
yeah,
I guess
so
if we
we're
need
ahead.
to, if we need to throw it in at the end for Dr. V, we can.
Okay. So the first question says, how do formal models distinguish between leadership and management, and why is this distinction important? So I put for management, it's more of um, hierarchical systems, functions, tasks, behavior, and
Yes.
leadership is finding the right bodies to carry out the activities, and then it's a pre-described. It's like a person described, not a. It's a person described to the hierarchy. So the leadership is the person, the management is the system, the activities, the task.
So that one of the things that you mentioned is one of the same things that I noted, which was that leadership is ascribed that same line to whoever is
Mhm.
at the apex of that hierarchy.
Mhm.
But I think one of the biggest things that I identified was how managerial leadership is associated with this formal model. So, and that sounds like what you and I talked about last week, and in one of our responses where we were talking about leadership management, but how when you can have that married, whether it's through a single individual or whether it's through a strong team, then you get the most bang. And that sounds very much like what the formal model is based on, is that kind of leadership.
Right. Okay. Um, the second part of that question was, why is this distinction important? And it's because it's a process and then the action and the person. So it's important to know the difference between the two because they serve two different purposes for the depending on the focus that you want. They serve different purposes.
One
Uh,
of the lines I marked for this one was, and I'm not really sure how to word it, like why is the distinction important, but it was talking about how when you're the principal, when your
mhm,
door says principal, then that shows that you have this dominance, this leadership that fits there. And so distinguishing between a leader and a manager, if you're a managerial leader, then that fits for principal. But sometimes I think we think that the principal is one or the other, when we don't really
mhm.
think about them as like being good at doing both things well. And sometimes they don't.
Right. All
You want
right.
me to read the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So the next one said, oh, I liked this question too. To what extent do formal models support or hinder innovation and creativity in schools? And
Um,
so you want
yep,
to
go
go ahead and
ahead.
answer that one. You can answer that one first.
I said I did both harmful and helpful. So for harmful, well, I'll do helpful first. For helpful, it says that it offers different management styles. So
Okay.
you can have different types. You can pick or have different. You can pick from each of the formal models, whatever you want, but you have different styles. It creates a goal-oriented environment. And it also presents organizational structure. So if you're organized, you can carry out more activities for the benefits of the school.
Okay.
Some of the harmful things I said is that some people are resilient. So when you're dealing with resilience, that plays a factor. Um, it's difficult to sustain a closed system approach. And for some schools, it may be unrealistic to be goal oriented. So those are the three and three
Some of
that
the things that
I have.
hinder.
Mhm.
So the one thing that I thought was positive about it was the structure, because I think there's a
Mhm.
place for having a structure. I think students thrive. I think teachers can thrive. But I definitely focused on the hinder portion for this because it talks about how that structure, one of the lines that I read said, teachers have a whole range of experiences that they draw on to respond to events.
Mhm.
And I think that this particular model, if not careful, doesn't allow teachers to use things like teachable moments. Like this type of model makes it seem like the leader sets these expectations and then you have to follow them. And it fits with what I've seen in my own experience, where you have a moment something comes up, and a teacher, because she has all this experience and this knowledge, would like to be able to respond to it in this way. But because of the way the organization and structure is set up by her leadership, she may not be able to use that moment. So I definitely think the one line where it says it may underestimate the contribution of individuals is definitely a danger that comes with this particular one.
Especially when you have teachers who are creative and willing to do anything, but once they're shut down or
Yep.
whatever, that goes out the window. Now they're just
Yep.
there.
And it says, like sometimes the teachers, they have this hierarchy in this model where they should be dealing with like a teacher leader who then deals with somebody else instead of going straight to the principal. But so like having a middle manager is sometimes helpful, but it says that sometimes these end up looking non-negotiable. So if teacher might feel like she can't go directly to the principal and get an answer to a question just like that, that she needs to walk through all these steps. And as well as I do, that the question or the concern loses some of its meaning as it passes its way up that hierarchy. So then the principal never even really knows that that particular teacher has a need or has a concern because it gets lost in translation. I
Hmm.
think that fits with that idea of it being something that could be a hindrance.
Yep, that's good. Okay. We're on three. It says, how do formal leadership models address issues of power and authority? Are these models effective in promoting equitable leadership?
Well, one of the things I think what that I just said about staff being a part of that hierarchy, that fits there. And whether or not it's non-negotiable that you have access. But then too, right at the beginning when it started talking about organizational structures, it talked about how schools are they're very real institutions.
Mhm.
And it is important that students and teachers both have that sense of belonging. And you said something about that just a minute ago. So once you shut a teacher down about something creative and they don't feel like they have that voice, that's where I can see this particular model and this structure causing that power and authority struggle that leaves teachers feeling like they don't have a voice and they don't have a place and they're not being heard. So I could see it being a very fine line. What did you think for that one?
I agree, and it depends on the theory and the model that's chosen for the school. So when I was at the school where teachers were used to doing nothing, the structural model worked because they needed structure.
Right.
And you did have some of the backlash to resilience and that stuff, but it worked for the school because we saw a shift. Now for the school that I'm in, where everybody has a voice, it's easier so he can have a more laid back model. He can either choose to be hierarchical or he could choose to do whatever, organizational. He could do anything because it's there and people are willing to do whatever because of the type of leader he is. So it just depends on the situation of the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in both. I've been in one where it was a power struggle, and I've been in other environments where everybody shared equal. Everybody was equal, but we all knew what the goal was, and we were working towards that goal.
Yep. Yeah. Well, the second part of that question mentioned about how these effective in promoting equitable leadership. And I definitely think that sometimes the formal model is where you will see, if it's managed correctly, that distributed leadership, where
Mhm.
because there's a hierarchy, you have teachers on various committees that do have a voice in that process, and that helps with equitable leadership. I don't know why I keep saying those words together.
That's right, I agree. All right. The next one says, think about your own school or educational setting. Where do you see evidence of formal leadership models at play? So for my current organization, I see more of still a structural model because he's new to the school. But he could come in doing that because of the type of leader he was and the type of workers that he has there. We all, we're family oriented and the climate's pretty good. So he's able to establish goals. So he does that before we leave for the summer. He goes, they already have a set plan, a climate goal. PBIS goals, expectation and rules for the school. So those he does that. Um, he fits to a his leadership is molded to our circumstance. So we're in um a low income, high need school. So that's the circumstance of the school. So the leadership style is based off
Matches.
of that.
Hmm.
Those everything. We got the scores, you got CCRPI, all that. So he's in there, but he also has like the state comes to our school. So
Okay.
and he listens to them. So everything is
Sure.
centered around our circumstance, and that's how he
Yep.
reads based off our circumstance. The last one I said was coordination and control are essential to effectiveness. So sometimes he does take control of things, and it's necessary when you have nobody that's really moving and he has to meet deadlines and we have to do this and that. He'll take control of it and then we'll follow under. So sometimes it is necessary, but it's essential to, like I said, what the overall circumstance of our school is. So
And that's a good perspective. I think too, I bring a unique perspective working for the Department of Education for this year because you talk about a formal leadership structure. It is very much by nature required to be that way with the various departments and the various superintendents of those departments, and then the overall superintendent and the I can't think what he's called right now, Matt Jones. I guess he's like the CEO. I didn't even realize like how much say he has
mhm.
in education, like fitting kind of like right below. But I definitely see it being a formal leadership model where I was looking at that the module that we went through in the Mrs. Thompson and how it talked about structured decision making. That's very much your state education, aligning with policy. Oh my gosh, every time the lawmakers meet, we get a new email of things we can't say, that we can't
Mhm.
reference. Like right now, because of laws, we can't talk about any kind of text. We've currently removed the term multicultural from our lingo as a department, even though it's in the language arts standards, because it's tied to some kind of policy. So this was a very timely class for me, kind of shifting out of this position and going back into a district and looking at it from my state, what I've been doing for the state for the past year, and then what I'll be doing again as a teacher.
Yeah, I agree. And we've gotten, even with our standards changing, our ELA standards are changing. Even with the pronouns down now, they want us to say like they, it has to be inclusive, they, them, and
That's where I am this week is in Atlanta with assessment. And so we work with DRC, the test creators,
to
and
be
they've had to address that in that they will use the proper noun more often in text than they have before because
mhm,
they don't want to confuse students with the they them pronouns. So instead of a sentence like maybe saying Bert walked to the store, he did so and so, they'll do everything they can to say Bert as many times as they can to just avoid the
the whole
whole
pronoun
the whole
thing.
thing, the whole related to policy.
Hmm. Okay.
So that final question for this part said, the power dynamics in formal models, and if we think authority based on position leads to effective leadership, why or why not? And so what I put for this is, I think the way I viewed this question was if you go into a leadership position at the top of that hierarchy in a place that has this formal model. If you weren't a leader when you started, I don't think you're going to become a leader by being in this position. I think you're going to continue to be whatever you were when you went in, and I don't think you're going to strengthen those skills, but you may drive people away using this model if you're not careful.
Hmm. I agree. I said, not necessarily. You can be authoritative in a position, but that doesn't mean you're effectively completing out the task of the position. So does that make you a leader or does it just make you a person in a position?
That's right.
So I took it as that. So it's still steps. When you're in that authoritative position, you still have responsibilities that fall upon us. So if those responsibilities are not being taken care of, you can be in the position and you can
Yep.
be authoritative. Um,
I mean, you're a leader.
yeah, you're the leader, but that's it. You're not producing any kind of work, any kind of
Yep.
plans, any kind of
And
growth.
you and I are from two different places in Georgia, but I guarantee you we both have the good old boy system in place in
Hmm.
some of those where you see people go into positions and they're in authority and they're not effective leaders. Like they maybe should have never been there. They play golf with the right person. They go to church with the right person.
No, they know the
It
right
doesn't,
person. And
yeah,
that's
it doesn't make
exactly.
them an effective leader simply from
Mhm.
holding the position.
Yep, that's kind of what we experience here is more of a who you know
Yeah,
type of deal, which
everywhere.
is everywhere, which it
Yep.
it works when the person you know you can vouch that they're gonna do the job. But
Sure.
if not that y'all play, y'all go, this is my church member, that's just all you know. So
Yeah.
so that's why I say it just depends. I've seen both. Like our region chief, he was my principal and my boss. So like I was telling you last time, I got to see all three. I got
Yep.
to see the principal as a student, then I saw the boss from another state on a
Right.
professional level, and then as a region chief, I saw a leader, of management. So I was able to see how he modeled, and it changed, but it was still reflective of the person he is. So
Okay, I think that got it. Other
yeah,
than the
that
module, I mean the model module from the two, the case study. Couldn't think of the
Yeah,
word.
we talked
We
about
talked
that
about it.
last week. And I read the new one, but I think we'll talk about that one
Okay, I
Sunday
haven't
with
gotten to that
you.
one.
So
I
it's
didn't want
really
to confuse
good. So
you or myself any further.
no, I'll let you read it, and then next week, I guess if it's on
Okay,
there, we'll talk about it.
all right,
Okay, well,
sounds good.
I'll upload this and I'll text you when I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of
Bye.
your day. See you later.